From a simple stick that can crack skulls to a weapon that can obliterate entire planets in seconds, today I'm ranking every type of Star Wars weapon from weakest to most powerful. And by the end, you'll see why even a Jedi with a lightsaber stands no chance against what's coming at level 7. Level 1 is basic melee weapons. These are the weapons you're stuck with when blasters aren't an option and you need to handle business up close. The most iconic one is the gaffy stick. This is the traditional weapon of the Tusken Raiders on Tatooine, and it's basically a 4-foot staff with a spike on one end and a club on the other. Tusken Raiders build these things from scrap metal and salvaged ship parts, so no two are exactly the same. The bent end, called the Trang, can even be dipped in sand bat venom to paralyze whoever gets hit. Boba Fett earned the right to build his own gaffy stick after joining a Tusken tribe, and we saw him use it to absolutely wreck stormtroopers on Tython. The thing punched straight through their armor like it was paper. This weapon is primitive, but in the right hands it proves to be very deadly. Another melee are vibroblades. These are short swords with ultrasonic generators built into the hilt that make the blade vibrate at insane speeds. Even a light graze becomes a massive wound because the vibrations tear through flesh and armor. They're self-sharpening, virtually indestructible, and favored by mercenaries, assassins, and bounty hunters across the galaxy. Vibroblades can cut through energy shields, which makes them way more useful than blasters in certain situations. The only problem, however, is that if you're fighting someone with an electro staff or any electric weapon, you're getting electrocuted. The blade conducts electricity straight back to you. Now, not many things could match up to a lightsaber. However, if you need a weapon that could, you'll need Beskar. The Mandalorians forge swords called Beskads from Beskar, Mandalorian iron, and these things are lightsaber resistant. Beskad is a single-edged blade about the length of your arm, heavy as a machete, and designed to crack armor with short, powerful slashes. It weighs about 4.5 pounds. Problem is, Beskar weapons are controversial. The Mandalorian faction called the Children of the Watch believe Beskar should only be used for armor, not weapons, since Beskar weapons can kill other Mandalorians wearing Beskar armor. But back in the day, ancient Mandalorian warriors wielded these regularly. There's also the Electro Staff, used by General Grievous's Magna Guard droids. It's a staff with energy fields on both ends that can cause serious damage to living tissue and objects. Another mind-blowing thing is that electro staffs are made from frick alloy, which means they can block lightsaber strikes. That made them the first non-lightsaber weapon in the Star Wars canon that could actually resist a lightsaber blade. And finally, you've got the Force Pike, a 1-meter staff used by Imperial guards. It has 2 settings, one that vibrates hard enough to shatter flesh, steel, and stone, and another that delivers an electric shock. You could set the shock low to prod someone or crank it up to kill. But here's the thing about these weapons. They all require you to get close. You're in stabbing range, which means your opponent is too. And in a galaxy filled with blasters and starfighters, getting that close is usually a death sentence. That is, unless you're one with the Force, which brings you to level 2. Lightsabers. This melee weapon is so unique and powerful that they've had to have a category of their own. A lightsaber is a plasma blade about 3 feet long that's emitted from a metal hilt. The blade has no mass, but it's powered by a kyber crystal at the weapon's heart. Kyber crystals are rare, force-attuned crystals that are found on planets like Ilum. When a Jedi finds their crystal during the gathering, the crystal is colorless. But once the Jedi bonds with it, the crystal changes color based on their connection to the Force. Most Jedi carry blue or green lightsabers. Blue represents Jedi Guardians who focus on combat, while green represents Consulars who focus on the Force and diplomacy. Sith lightsabers are red because Sith can't bond with kyber crystals naturally. Instead, they have to bleed the crystal by pouring their hatred into it, which corrupts it and turns it red. If the bleeding process fails, the crystal cracks like Kylo Ren's, which creates an unstable blade that requires vents to release the excess energy. Lightsabers can cut through almost anything. Blast doors, droids, stormtrooper armor are all mincemeat in front of it. They can also deflect blaster bolts, which makes a skilled Force user nearly untouchable in a firefight. But they're not unstoppable. Beskar, Cortosis, and Frick Alloy can all resist lightsaber blades. If you're not Force sensitive, good luck even turning one on without cutting your own arm off. And the lightsaber also has variants. The most famous one is the Darksaber, a unique black-bladed lightsaber with a flat blade and a white edge. It was created by Tar Vizsla, the first Mandalorian Jedi, and it's become a symbol of Mandalorian leadership. Whoever wields the Darksaber can claim the Mandalorian throne, but only if they win it in combat. Din Djarin, Bo-Katan, Sabine Wren, and even Darth Maul have wielded it at different points. Another variant you might also recognize are double-bladed lightsabers, also called saber staves. Darth Maul made these famous. They have a blade on both ends and require 2 kyber crystals. They're devastating offensively because you can attack from multiple angles, but they're incredibly hard to master. One wrong move and you're cutting yourself in half. There are also crossguard lightsabers like Kylo Ren's. These have a main blade plus 2 smaller side blades that act as a crossguard. The side blades are actually vents that shunt excess power away from the main blade, and they can block and trap an opponent's lightsaber. Other variants include curved hilt lightsabers used by Count Dooku, lightsaber shotos, which is Yoda's short saber, and even light whips, which are flexible blades used like whips. And then there are the Inquisitor's spinning lightsabers, double-bladed sabers mounted on a spinning ring that can even provide short-term flight. But here's the problem with lightsabers. Like all melee is their range. You're still limited to close combat. A skilled sniper 500 meters away could take you out before you even know they're there, force or not, which brings us to level 3. Level 3 are primitive and projectile weapons. These are old school kinetic weapons that fire actual physical projectiles instead of energy. The most common one is the cycler rifle, used heavily by the Tusken Raiders. These are long-barreled rifles that fire solid slugs, and they're extremely effective for long-range combat. Tusken Raiders used them to pick off pod racers during the Boonta Eve Classic that young Anakin won, and Boba Fett also carried one too. Now you might wonder what the advantage of these weapons may be. That makes them still in use, and that is, it could penetrate energy shields, which blasters can't do. And here's the more shocking thing about them, is that they're harder for a Jedi to deflect. When a Jedi tries to block a slug with their lightsaber, the slug melts instead of bouncing back. That molten metal and shrapnel sprays everywhere, which can still hit the Jedi. It's a brutal counter to lightsaber users. Scatterguns and slug throwers work the same way. Scatterguns are basically shotguns as they spray multiple projectiles in a wide pattern, which is devastating at close range. In the Battlefront games, these things were a nightmare in tight spaces like Jabba's palace. One shot could drop you dead instantly. Then you got grenades. Thermal detonators are the most common, which are electric grenades used by militaries and bounty hunters across the galaxy. They're filled with baradium, a synthetic explosive compound. You can set a timer on them, turning them into ticking time bombs. And one mind-blowing fact is that the person who activated the thermal detonator is the only person who can deactivate it. Princess Leia used one when she was disguised as bounty hunter Bosch in Jabba's palace. Another one, which are ion grenades, can send out an electric shock that's devastating against droids, vehicles, and shields. They were used heavily during the Clone Wars against the separatist droid army. Dioxis grenades release toxic gas, sonic imploders use sound-based blasts, and thermal imploders have an even bigger explosion radius than standard thermal detonators. But even with all that firepower, you're still limited. Projectile weapons require ammunition. They have limited range compared to energy weapons, and they're pretty common on backwater planets, but not standard military issue. That's why this next level is so much better. Level 4 are blasters, the most common weapons in the entire galaxy. Blasters fire energized particle beams using blaster gas and energy cells. The gas used determines the bolt color. Cheap gas creates red bolts, while more expensive gas produces green or blue bolts, which are particularly useful against robotic enemies. They're effective, reliable, and don't require you to carry physical ammunition. Let's start with blaster pistols. The most famous one is the DL-44 heavy blaster pistol, Han Solo's weapon. It's one of the most powerful blaster pistols in the galaxy, capable of blowing through stormtrooper armor with ease. But it came with a massive trade-off. It overheats fast. This weapon is favored by smugglers, traders, and bounty hunters because it delivers massive damage at close range. Blaster carbines are the middle ground of blasters since they are shorter than rifles but longer than pistols. Boba Fett used a modified EE-3 carbine rifle as his primary weapon. Battle droids carried the E-5 blaster carbine, which became the standard separatist weapon during the Clone Wars. Blaster rifles are the heaviest of them all since you get serious range and power. Clone troopers carried the DC-15A heavy blaster rifle, a long-range, high-powered weapon that fired blue bolts. It weighed about 9 pounds and was considered more accurate than the E-11 that eventually replaced it. Speaking of the E-11, that's the standard Imperial blaster rifles carried by stormtroopers. It's a mid-range weapon based on the British Sterling submachine gun. The Rebel Alliance used the A2 Z280 blaster rifle as their standard. Then you got heavy blasters and rotary blasters. The Z6 rotary blaster cannon is carried by clone trooper heavy gunners. It's designed to sustain fire and can mow down entire squads if you're not careful. Blasters are everywhere because they're easy to manufacture, easy to use, and incredibly effective. A squad of soldiers with blaster rifles can overwhelm even a skilled Jedi. That's exactly what happened during Order 66. Jedi were powerful, but they couldn't deflect blaster fire from every direction at once. But blasters are still personal weapons. One person, one gun. What happens when you mount those weapons on something bigger? Level 5 is vehicle mounted weapon. Now we're getting into the big boys. Let's start with the ATST, the all-terrain scout transport, also known as the Chicken Walker. It's an 8.6 meter tall two-legged Imperial walker designed for reconnaissance and patrol. It's armed with chin-mounted twin blaster cannons that have a 2-kilometer range, plus a side-mounted concussion grenade launcher that can wreck infantry and light vehicles. ATSTs are fast, as they can hit 90 kilometers per hour, and their two-legged design makes them way more maneuverable than bigger walkers. But that's also their weakness. They're top-heavy and can be tipped over pretty easily. We saw this at the Battle of Endor when Ewoks used logs to crush them. Now, if you want something truly terrifying, you need an AT-AT, the all-terrain armored transport. These things are 22.5 meters tall, or 74 feet, and they weigh thousands of tons. They're four-legged walking fortresses that can carry 40 troops and 5 speeder bikes inside at once. And AT-AT's main weapons are 2 chin-mounted heavy laser cannons, powerful enough to destroy artillery installations and enemy fortification. On the sides of the head, there are 2 medium blaster cannons that can independently rotate to hit different targets. The AT-AT's sheer height gives it a massive advantage, which is it could rain down destruction from above like a mobile weapons platform. AT-ATs are nearly invulnerable to small arms fire, and blaster rifles are completely useless against it. Building heavy artillery, starfighter missiles, or capital ship weapons to take one down. But there's a workaround. The rebels discovered it at the Battle of Hoth, where they used tow cables from T-47 airspeeders to wrap around the AT-AT's legs and trip them. But that strategy requires you to fly directly into the walker's firing range, which is basically a suicide mission. Vehicle-mounted weapons changed warfare in the galaxy, but even an AT-AT is limited to ground combat. It can't fly, it can't pursue enemies into space, but level 6 can. Level 6 are starfighters and gunships, and since we're in space, the firepower jumps dramatically. Let's start with the X-Wing. This is the Rebel Alliance's primary starfighter, and it's armed with 4 laser cannons and 2 proton torpedo launchers. Luke Skywalker used an X-Wing to destroy the Death Star by firing a proton torpedo down the exhaust port. X-Wings are versatile, fast, and heavy armed for their size. TIE fighters are the Imperial equivalent. They're equipped with twin laser cannons and are designed for speed and agility. The Empire mass-produced them, which is why they don't have shields, as shields cost money, and the Empire valued quantity over pilot survival. TIE fighters rely on overwhelming numbers to win battles. Y-Wings are bombers. They carry ion cannons and proton bombs, making them perfect for taking out capital ships and ground installations. They're slower than X-Wings, but pack way more punch. Then you've got the gunships like the LAATI gunship. These were used during the Clone Wars to transport troops while providing heavy fire support. They're armed with multiple laser cannons, missile launchers, and can carry a full squad of clone troopers into combat. Gunships are flying weapons platforms that can engage ground and air targets simultaneously. Starfighters changed everything because they're not limited by terrain. They can attack from any angle, pursue fleeing enemies into space, and engage targets across entire planetary system. A single squadron of starfighters can take out ground vehicles, other fighters, and even damage capital ships if they coordinate their attacks. But starfighters are still small. They carry limited ammunition. They're vulnerable to anti-aircraft fire, and they can't take on truly massive targets alone. For that, you need level 7. Level 7 are capital ships and super weapons. This is where we enter the realm of weapons that can destroy entire fleets and entire planets. Let's start with Star Destroyers. An Imperial Star Destroyer is 1,600 meters long, more than a full kilometer, and it's armed with 60 turbo laser batteries, 60 ion cannons, and multiple point defense systems. Turbo lasers are massive versions of blaster cannons designed specifically for space combat. A single turbo laser bolt can vaporize a starfighter in one hit, and a Star Destroyer has 60 of them. A Venator-class Star Destroyer used by the Republic during the Clone Wars had a similar loadout, heavy turbo lasers, ion cannons, and point defense systems. These ships could carry hundreds of starfighters and engage entire enemy fleets. One Star Destroyer could single-handedly blockade a planet. Super Star Destroyers take this concept to the extreme. They're bigger and have way more guns. An example being the Executor, Darth Vader's flagship, was 19,000 meters long. That's longer than some cities. But even Death Stars pale in comparison to super weapon. The Death Star is a moon-sized battle station armed with a planet-destroying super laser. The super laser is powered by massive hypercrystals, the same crystals that power lightsabers, just on an incomprehensibly larger scale. The crystals focus energy from a hypermatter reactor and fire a beam powerful enough to crack planet's core and cause it to explode. The Death Star destroyed Alderaan in a single shot. An entire planet with billions of people was gone in seconds. The weapon, however, has to charge between shots and needs a direct line of sight to its target. But once it fires, there's no defense, no shield, no fleet, nothing can stop it. Then there's Starkiller Base. This is the First Order's answer to the Death Star, and it's even more powerful. Starkiller Base is built on an entire ice planet, and instead of using a reactor, it drains energy directly from a star. Once it's fully charged, it can fire a beam that splits into multiple projectiles and destroys several planets at once across different star systems. The beam can also travel through hyperspace, meaning it can hit targets on the other side of the galaxy instantly. Starkiller Base destroyed the entire Hosnian system, 5 planets, including the New Republic capital, in one shot. That's not just planetary destruction, that's system-wide annihilation. That's level 7, weapons that make armies irrelevant. Weapons that make fleets irrelevant. Weapons that can end entire civilizations before they even know they're under attack. So there you have it. From a Tusken Raider's gaffy stick to a base that drinks stars and erases planets, every weapon in Star Wars exists on this insane power scale. If you want to know the 7 levels of battle droids, watch this video next.